So this is chapter 13 and 14. I have to re-record them because I did a bad job on my link. So here we go again, chapter 13. You'll remember our hero, Milo, was sneaking into the castle of sounds to steal a word, and he had trapped the word in his mouth. The word was B-U-T, but. And he held it in his mouth, and he snuck out of the castle with the word in his mouth because they wanted to blast the castle of sound and get all the sounds back for all the poor people who couldn't talk. So here we go. With his mouth shut tight and his feet moving fast, Milo ran all the way back to the car. There was great excitement when he arrived as Talk raced happily around the road to greet him. The humbug personally accepted all congratulations from the crowd. "Where's the sound?" someone hastily wrote on the blackboard, and they all waited anxiously for the reply. Milo caught his breath, picked up the chalk, and explained simply, "It's on the tip of my tongue." Several people excitedly threw their hats in the air and some shouted. They pushed the heavy cannon in place, rolled it up to Milo. He edged up to the cannon and let the word slip out of his mouth into the cannon, which was aimed at the castle wall. The small sound dropped silently to the bottom and everything was ready. In another moment, the fuse was lit. "I hope no one gets hurt," said Milo, and before he had time to think again, an immense gray cloud of white smoke leapt from the gun, and along with it, so softly that it was hardly heard, came the sound of "but." It flew toward the wall for several seconds, and then there was a blast, a thundering smash, followed by a crashing, shattering, bursting crash, and every stone in the fortress toppled to the ground. Every sound that had ever been made came hurtling out of the debris. There was whispering, humming, screaming, coughing, sneezing, all at the same time. There were bits of old speeches floating around, recited lessons, waterfalls, electric fans, galloping horses, and a great deal of everything else. For a while, it was deafening confusion. Then, as quickly as it had come, the sounds disappeared over the hill in search of new freedom, and things were normal again. People quickly went about their busy, talkative business, and the smoke and dust cleared, and only Milo, Talk, and the humbug noticed the soundkeeper sitting sadly on a pile of rubble. "I'm terribly sorry," said Milo as he went to console her. "But we had to do it," said Talk. "What a terrible mess," observed the humbug, who always said the wrong thing. The soundkeeper looked around unhappily. "It will take years to collect all those sounds again," she sobbed, "and even longer to put them back in proper order. But it's all my fault, for you can't improve sound by having only silence. The problem is to use sound at the right time." And as she spoke, the familiar and unmistakable squench, squanch of the din's heavy footsteps could be heard plodding over the hill. "Can anyone use these sounds?" he puffed, mopping his forehead. "They came over the hill all at once, and none of them are awful enough for me." The soundkeeper peered in the sack, and there were all the sounds. "How nice of you return them," she cried happily. "You and the doctor must come by for an evening of beautiful music when my fortress is repaired." The thought of it horrified the din, and he ran off in great panic. "Oh, I hope I haven't offended him," she said with some concern. "He only likes unpleasant sounds," volunteered Talk. "Oh, yes," she sighed. "I keep forgetting that many people do. If only Rhyme and Reason would come back, I'm sure things would improve." "That's why we're going to rescue them," said Milo proudly. "What a long, hard journey that will be. You'll need some nourishment." And she wrapped up a package with string. "Now remember," she said, "these sounds are they're not for eating. They're for listening to, because you'll often be hungry for sounds as well as food. Here are some street noises, train whistles, dry leaves burning, bed springs. There's a little of each. And in far off lonely places, I think you'll be glad to have them." Now remember, boys and girls, in a book, when an author puts something like this in, you remember that King Azaz also gave Milo a gift. So he's been given several gifts. You should be asking yourself, how will they use those gifts? Are they going to come back into the story? I think so. Milo said goodbye, and they drove off toward Digitopolis. The shoreline was peaceful and flat, and the calm sea bumped it playfully along the sandy beach. In the distance, they spotted a beautiful island covered with palm trees and flowers and sparkling water. Here's the beautiful island. Something's happening to the humbug. "Nothing can possibly go wrong now," cried the humbug happily. And as soon as he said it, he sailed off all the way out to the little island. And we'll have plenty of time, answered Talk, who hadn't noticed the bug was missing, and he too suddenly leapt into the air and disappeared. It certainly could have been a nicer day, agreed Milo, who was too busy looking at the road to notice all his friends were gone, and in a split second he was gone too. He landed next to Talk and the terrified humbug. It was the island, but instead of palms and flowers, there were only rocks and twisted stumps and dead trees. It did not look like the same place they'd seen from the road. Pardon me, said Milo to the first person he saw, but can you tell me where I am? Pardon me, replied the man, but can you tell me who I am? The man was dressed in a shaggy tweed jacket and knickers and long stockings, and he seemed as confused as could be. You must know who you are, said Milo impatiently. Well, you must know where you are, said the man with equal annoyance. Oh dear, this is going to be difficult, said Milo, whispering to Talk. I wonder if we can help him. They conferred for a few minutes and then turned to the man and said, could you please describe yourself so we could help tell you who you are? The man said, yes, indeed. I'm as tall as can be, and I'm as short as can be. I'm as generous as can be, and I'm as selfish as can be. And he handed them some apples and snatched them back. I'm as strong as can be, he roared, lifting an enormous boulder. And I'm as weak as can be, he gasped, staggering under the weight of his hat. I'm as smart as can be, he remarked in 12 different languages, and I'm as stupid as can be, he admitted, putting both feet in one shoe. I'm as graceful as can be and as clumsy as can be. Once again, Milo and his friends conferred in busy whispers until they all agreed. It's really very simple, said the humbug, twirling his cane. If everything you say is true, then without a doubt, Milo concluded brightly, you must be can be. Get it? I'm as tall as can be, and I'm as short as can be. Of course, yes, of course, the man shouted. Why didn't I think of that? I'm as happy as can be. Then he quickly sat down, but I'm also as sad as can be. Now, will you tell us where we are? Asked Talk. To be sure, you're on the island of conclusions. Make yourself at home. You're apt to be here for some time. But how did we get here? Asked Milo, who was still a bit puzzled by being there at all. You jumped, of course, said Canby. That's the way almost everyone gets here. It's really quite simple. Every time you decide something without having a good reason, you jump to conclusions, whether you like it or not. It's such an easy trip to make that I've been here hundreds of times. But this is such an unpleasant looking place, said Milo. Yes, that's true, said Canby. It does look much better from a distance. As he spoke, at least 8 or 9 more people sailed onto the island. Well, I'm going to jump right back, announced the humbug, who took 2 or 3 leaps and landed in a heap 2 feet away. That won't do at all, scolded Canby, helping him back up. You can never jump away from conclusions. Getting back is not so easy. That's why you're so terribly crowded here. And as Milo looked around, they realized it was true. There was an enormous crowd of people, all sadly looking out to sea. Isn't there a boat? Asked Milo. Oh, no, replied Canby. The only way back is to swim, and that's a very long and very hard way. I don't like to get wet, moaned the unhappy bug. Neither do they, said Canby sadly, but that's what keeps them here. But I wouldn't worry too much about it, for you can swim all day in the sea of knowledge and still come out completely dry, which is a little joke because you can study all you want and not learn anything if you don't try. Most people do, but you must excuse me now. I have to greet the new arrivals. As you know, I'm as friendly as can be. Over the humbug's strenuous objections, Milo and Talk decided to swim. They swam and swam for what seemed like hours, and only Talk's firm encouragement kept Milo struggling through the icy water. But at last they reached the shore. That wasn't bad at all, the humbug said, straightening his tie and brushing himself off. I must visit there again. I'm sure you will, gasped Milo, but from now on, I'm going to have a very good reason before I make up my mind about anything. You can lose too much time jumping to conclusions. And they hopped in the little car and drove off. The next chapter is the dodecahedron leads the way. Up ahead, the road divided into 3, and as if in reply to Milo's question, an enormous road sign pointed in all 3 directions, stating clearly, Digitopolis. 5 miles, 1,600 rods, 8,800 yards, 26,400 feet, 316,800 inches, 633,600 half inches, and then some. Let's travel by miles, advised the humbug. It's shorter. Let's travel by half inches, suggested Milo. It's quicker. Is either of those things true? But which road should we take? It must make a difference. As they argued, a little peculiar figure stepped up nimbly from behind a sign and approached them, talking all the while. Yes, indeed it does. Certainly yes, it does. It makes a difference, undoubtedly. So this is the dodecahedron. And the last time I recorded this, I was at home where my son had folded a dodecahedron, a many-sided shape. I think they're supposed to have 12 faces. So you could Google it, dodecahedron, and see what a dodecahedron looks like. Here's the picture they have in the book, which is not at all what it looks like, maybe the middle part. And he has a different face on each side of his geometric face. It's one of my favorite characters. When he reached the car, the little figure doffed his cap and recited in a clear voice, "My angles are many, my sides are not few. I'm the dodecahedron. Who are you?" "What's a dodecahedron?" inquired Milo, who was barely able to pronounce the strange word. And here's how it's spelled if you want to look it up. D-O-D-E-C-A-H-E-D-R-O-N, dodecahedron. "See for yourself," he said, turning around slowly. "A dodecahedron is a mathematical shape with 12 faces." Just as he said it, 11 other faces appeared. They're using the word face to mean this, but also the mathematical face or the smooth side of a geometric object. "I usually use my faces one at a time," he confided, "but they all have different expressions." "What are you called?" "Milo," said Milo. "That's an odd name," he said, changing his smiling face for a frowning one. "And you only have one face." "Is that bad?" asked Milo, making sure it was still there. "You'll soon wear it out if you use it for everything," replied the dodecahedron. "Now I have one for smiling, one for laughing, one for crying, one for frowning, one for thinking, one for pouting, and 6 more besides. Is everyone with one face called a Milo?" "Oh, no," replied Milo. "Some are called Henry, George, Robert, John." "How terribly confusing," he cried. "Everything here is called exactly what it is. Triangles are called triangles. Circles are called circles. Even numbers have the same name. Why, can you imagine what would happen if we named all the twos Henry or George or Robert? You'd have to say Robert plus John equals 4. And if the 4's name were Albert, things would be hopeless." "I never thought of it that way," admitted Milo. "Then I suggest you begin at once," said the dodecahedron from his admonishing face. "For here in Digitopolis, everything is quite precise." "Ooh, then perhaps you can help us decide which road to take," said Milo. "By all means," he replied happily. "Listen carefully. Everybody write this down in your notebooks. There's nothing to it. If a small car carrying 3 people at 30 miles an hour for 10 minutes along a road 5 miles long at 11:35 in the morning starts at the same time as 3 people who've been traveling in a little automobile at 20 miles an hour for 15 minutes on another road exactly twice as long as one half the distance as the other, while a dog, a bug, a boy, and a car travel in an equal distance at the same time on the same distance on an equal time along a third road in mid-October, then which one arrives first? And which is the best way to go?" 17, shouted the humbug, scribbling furiously on a piece of paper. "Well, I'm not sure, but," Milo stammered after several minutes of frantic figuring. "You'll have to do better than that," scolded the dodecahedron, "or you'll never know how far you've gone or whether or not you've ever gotten there." "I'm not very good at problems," admitted Milo. "What a shame," sighed the dodecahedron. "They're so very useful. Why, did you know that if a beaver 2 feet long with a tail a foot and a half long can build a dam 12 feet high and 6 feet wide in 2 days, all you would need to build Boulder Dam is a beaver 68 feet long with a 51-foot tail." "Where would you find a beaver that big?" grumbled the humbug. "I'm sure I don't know," he replied, "but if you did, you'd certainly know what to do with it." "That's absurd," objected Milo, whose head was spinning from all the numbers and questions. "That may be true," he acknowledged, "but it's completely accurate. And as long as the answer is right, who cares if the question is wrong? If you want sense, you'll have to make it yourself. Have you ever felt that way about math problems?" "All 3 roads arrived at the same place at the same time," interrupted Talk, who had patiently been doing the first problem. "Correct," shouted the dodecahedron, "and I'll take you there myself." And they hopped in the car and headed towards Digitopolis. The new road was quite bumpy and full of stones, and each time they hit one, the dodecahedron bounced in the air and landed on one of his faces. "We'll soon be there," he announced happily after one of his short flights. "Welcome to the land of numbers." "It doesn't look very inviting," the bug remarked. "Is this the place where numbers are made?" asked Milo. Certainly not. They're not made, replied the dodecahedron. You have to dig for them. Don't you know anything at all about numbers? Well, I don't think they're very important, snapped Milo, too embarrassed to admit the truth. Not important, roared the dodecahedron, turning red with fury. Could you have your tea for two without the two, or three blind mice without the three? Would there be four corners to the earth if there weren't a four? And how could you sail the seven seas without a seven? All I meant was, replied Milo, but the dodecahedron, overcome with emotion and shouting furiously, carried right on. Come along, he shouted. I can't wait for you all day. And in a moment, they followed him into the mine and into the mountain as he mumbled away. Why, numbers are the most beautiful and valuable things in the world. Just follow me, follow me. It took several minutes for their eyes to become accustomed to the dim light. And during the time, strange scratching could be heard all around them. Put these on, instructed the dodecahedron, handing each of them a helmet with a flashlight attached to the top. Where are we going? Whispered Milo, for it seemed like the kind of place where you whispered. We're here, he replied with a sweeping gesture. This is the numbers mine. Milo squinted, and in the darkness he saw little men no bigger than himself, busily chopping, scraping, and pulling with carts full of stone. Right this way, said the dodecahedron, and watch where you step. As he spoke, his voice echoed and re-echoed. Whose mine is this? Asked Milo, stepping around two of the loaded wagons. By the 4,827,659 hairs on my head, it's mine, of course, bellowed a voice from across the cavern. Who is it? Do you know? And striding toward them came a figure who could only have been the mathemagician. Let me show you that word so you can write it in your notebook. Math, M-A-T-E-T-H, sorry, E, and then magician, M-A-G-I-C-I-A-N, mathemagician. He was dressed in a long flowing robe covered entirely with complex mathematical equations and a tall pointed cap that made him look very wise. In his left hand, he carried a staff with a pencil point at one end and a large rubber eraser at the other. It's a lovely mine, apologized the humbug, who was always intimidated by loud noises. The biggest number mine in the kingdom, said the mathemagician proudly. Are there any precious stones in it? Asked Milo excitedly. Precious stones, he roared, even louder than before, and then he leaned over Milo and whispered softly. By the 8,247,312 threads in my robe, I'll say there are. Look here. He reached into one of the carts and pulled out a small object. It sparkled in the light. But that's a 5, objected Milo, for that certainly was what it was. Exactly, agreed the mathemagician. As valuable a jewel as you'll find anywhere. Look at some of the others. And he scooped up great handfuls of stones and poured them into Milo's arms. They included all the numbers from 1 to 9 and even an assortment of zeros. We dig and polish them right here, he said. They're exceptional, said Talk, who had a special fondness for numbers. So that's where they come from, said Milo, looking in awe. The number he was holding, though, he wasn't holding very carefully, and it fell and it broke in two. Oh, don't worry about that, said the mathematician. We use the broken ones for fractions. Haven't you any diamonds or emeralds or rubies? Asked the bug irritably, for he was very disappointed in the numbers. Yes, indeed, the mathematician replied, and here he is for you to look at. Come right this way, and there, piled in the corner in enormous mounds almost to the ceiling, were diamonds and rubies and emeralds and sapphires. They're such a terrible nuisance, sighed the mathematician, and no one can think of anything to do with them, so we just keep digging them up and throwing them out. Now, he said, taking a silver whistle from his pocket and blowing it loudly, let's have some lunch. And for the first time in his life, the astonished bug couldn't think of a thing to say. So remember the meal they had in Dictionopolis and see if you can make some predictions about what this meal will be like in Digitopolis. Bye. See you next time.